Every year, on the 10th day of Muharram, Muslims around the world mark a day known as Ashura. It is one date, but it carries more than one memory. For some, it is a day of fasting, gratitude, and reflection on divine rescue. For others, especially Shia Muslims, it is a day of mourning for Husayn ibn Ali, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, who was killed at Karbala in 680 CE. That combination makes Ashura one of the most emotionally layered days in Islam. It is not only about remembering the past. It is about asking what faith means when people face fear, injustice, loyalty, and moral pressure. Ashura falls on the 10th of Muharram, the first month of the Islamic lunar calendar. Because the Islamic calendar follows the moon, Ashura does not stay fixed to the same season in the solar year. It moves earlier each year, appearing in different months over time. Muharram itself is considered a sacred month, a period associated with restraint, worship, and reflection. The name Ashura is connected to the number 10, but the day became important because of the meanings attached to it. Across Islamic history, it became a vessel for stories of rescue, repentance, suffering, sacrifice, and resistance. In Sunni tradition, Ashura is closely linked with the story of Moses and the Israelites. According to well-known traditions, this was the day when God saved Moses and his people from Pharaoh by parting the Red Sea. The story gives Ashura a powerful theme: the oppressed appear trapped, the ruler pursuing them seems unstoppable, and then divine help opens a way forward. For many Sunni Muslims, fasting on Ashura becomes an act of gratitude for that rescue. It is a voluntary fast, not like the required fast of Ramadan, but it carries devotional meaning because it turns a historical memory into a personal act of worship. Other Sunni traditions connect Ashura with moments of mercy and renewal in sacred history. Some accounts associate it with Noah leaving the ark after the flood, Adam being forgiven, Joseph being released from prison, and other events involving deliverance after hardship. These traditions are not all treated with the same weight by every scholar, but together they reveal how Ashura became associated with release, forgiveness, and survival. The pattern is consistent: trial comes first, then mercy follows. That is why Ashura can be observed quietly through prayer, charity, fasting, and reflection. It becomes a day to remember that hardship is not always the end of the story. For Shia Muslims, Ashura is centered above all on the tragedy of Karbala. Husayn ibn Ali was the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib and Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. In Shia Islam, Husayn is the third Imam, a spiritual and moral guide whose life represents justice and devotion to God. In the year 680, the Umayyad Caliph Yazid ibn Muawiyah sought allegiance from important figures in the Muslim community. Husayn refused. His refusal is remembered not as ordinary politics, but as a moral stand against a ruler he could not endorse. In Shia memory, conscience could not be sold for safety. The crisis that led to Karbala developed during a difficult period in early Islamic history. Leadership of the Muslim community had become deeply contested after the Prophet Muhammad's death, and over time political authority shifted into dynastic rule under the Umayyads. Yazid's demand for allegiance placed Husayn in a dangerous position. If he accepted, it could be seen as legitimizing a ruler he considered morally unacceptable. If he refused, he risked confrontation with imperial power. Husayn traveled with relatives and a small group of supporters, not with a large army. That detail matters, because Karbala is remembered as a confrontation between principle and overwhelming force. At Karbala, in present-day Iraq, Husayn and his small group were surrounded by forces loyal to the Umayyad authorities. The imbalance was extreme. On one side stood a small band including members of the Prophet's family. On the other stood a much larger military force representing the state. The story is remembered with particular pain because of the siege, isolation, and thirst endured by Husayn's camp. Ashura was the day the confrontation reached its fatal end. Husayn and most of the men with him were killed. In military terms, they lost. But in religious memory, their refusal became a lasting symbol of moral victory over coercive power. The death of Husayn is central to Shia identity because it is seen as more than a historical tragedy. It becomes a model of resistance to oppression. Husayn is remembered as someone who chose death over humiliation and truth over convenience. His martyrdom teaches that there are moments when survival cannot be the highest value if survival requires surrendering justice. This is why Karbala remains emotionally alive more than 13 centuries later. It gives believers a language for thinking about tyranny, betrayal, sacrifice, and loyalty. The question is not only what happened to Husayn, but what people today do when they face injustice in their own world. Shia observances of Ashura often include mourning gatherings, sermons, poetry, elegies, and retellings of the events of Karbala. These gatherings are not simply lectures about history. They are acts of spiritual participation. The story is told as a living wound, and mourners respond with grief, tears, and public expressions of sorrow. In many communities, people strike their chests rhythmically as a sign of mourning and solidarity with Husayn's suffering. The purpose is not to recreate pain for its own sake, but to refuse emotional distance from injustice. Mourning becomes a form of devotion, memory, and protest. In some places, Ashura also includes public processions and dramatic reenactments of Karbala. Streets may be filled with black banners, recitations, symbolic standards, and crowds moving together in collective grief. These practices vary widely across countries and cultures, but the purpose is often the same: to make memory visible. The reenactments are not entertainment in the ordinary sense. The audience already knows the outcome. What matters is the repeated act of remembering. Each year, the story is carried into public space so the values attached to it remain active: courage, loyalty, sacrifice, and refusal to bow before injustice. Some Ashura practices, especially extreme forms of self-flagellation involving bloodshed, are controversial within Shia Islam itself. Many Shia clerics condemn or discourage these acts, arguing that mourning should not cause serious harm or should not present the faith in a damaging way. In some communities, such practices have been restricted or replaced with alternatives such as blood donation. This debate shows that Ashura is not a single frozen ritual. Muslims continue to discuss how best to honor Husayn, through mourning, ethical action, charity, education, public processions, or private prayer. The central issue is how memory should shape conduct. Sunni Muslims also regard the killing of Husayn as a grave tragedy, though Sunni Ashura practices are usually different from Shia mourning rituals. Many Sunni sermons and teachings express respect for Husayn and sorrow over his death, while the main devotional emphasis often remains fasting and gratitude connected to Moses and divine rescue. In some historical settings, Ashura was marked with more celebratory customs, but certain Sunni scholars criticized excessive celebration as inappropriate. These differences in emphasis have sometimes contributed to sectarian tension. Yet the figure of Husayn is widely honored across Islam, even when communities remember the day in different ways. Ashura has sometimes become a flashpoint for sectarian violence, particularly against Shia minorities during public commemorations. This adds a painful modern layer to the day. A commemoration centered on oppression can itself become a moment when vulnerable communities face danger. And yet, that is part of why Ashura continues to matter so deeply. Whether observed through fasting, mourning, sermons, charity, processions, or quiet prayer, the day keeps alive a demanding moral message. It remembers rescue from tyranny in the story of Moses, and resistance to tyranny in the story of Husayn. Ashura endures because it asks a timeless question: when faith becomes costly, what are we willing to stand for? If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.